That can be scary. Come into a place like this, you don't know anybody, you just getting here.
Asia's worst women's prisons hide terrifying secrets. Brutal guards, overcrowded cells, and punishments that defy human rights. Survival isn't just about following the rules, it's about enduring the unimaginable. From torturous solitary confinement to deadly inmate rivalries, these prisons are nightmares brought to life. Some have shocking death rates, while others force prisoners into labor under inhumane conditions. What happens behind these walls will leave you speechless. Join us on this special episode as we uncover the 10 worst women's prisons in Asia. Number 10. Bangkwang Central Prison. Thailand's prison system is notorious for its brutality, and no facility embodies this more than the Bangkwang Central Prison. It's a place that eats people alive, where prisoners face years of suffering in overcrowded, unsanitary, and violent conditions. The harsh reality of these jails serves as a warning, yet foreigners still find themselves locked away for drug-related offenses. In Thailand, when they say zero tolerance, they mean it. Drug laws are among the strictest in the world, with thousands of traffickers being executed in government crackdowns. The message couldn't be more precise, yet people continue to take the risk, only to end up in hellish conditions that break them physically and mentally. The women's section of this prison, the Central Women's Correctional Institution, often referred to as the Bangkok Hilton, is one of the harshest places on earth. Unlike the men's section, where violence and overcrowding are the main problems, the women's prison has its unique brand of brutality. It is a place where despair, abuse, and the sheer weight of time break inmates both physically and mentally. Cells meant to hold a handful of inmates are stuffed with 200 or more women. At night, prisoners sleep shoulder to shoulder, like sardines in a can. There is no privacy, no comfort, just bodies crammed together on the hard floor. Some inmates sleep with their heads resting on others' feet, rotating positions when one shifts. With so many women sharing such small spaces, conflicts are inevitable. Fights break out over the most minor things: stolen food, space on the floor, or even a misplaced glance. There is no peace in the Bangkok Hilton. It is a constant struggle for survival. By day, the prisoners are put to work. The prison is essentially a sweatshop, where women labor for hours, making handicrafts, sewing, or producing cheap goods that are later sold outside. Their money is a pittance, nowhere near enough to buy necessities. Yet they must work, not only to stay occupied, but to avoid the wrath of the guards. Some foreign prisoners, particularly those who have money, can avoid the worst of the labor by bribing their way out. But for the majority, the work is exhausting, repetitive, and soul-crushing. The idea that these skills will help them when they leave is a cruel joke. Most will never leave. Guards control every aspect of the prisoners' lives, and corruption is rampant. Money and favors determine how well an inmate survives. Those with family on the outside who can send bribes live far better than those who have nothing. Corrupt officials sell food, toiletries, and even beds to prisoners who can pay. The alternative is starvation and suffering. Physical and verbal abuse from guards is common, but worse is what happens in the shadows. Women are particularly vulnerable to abuse and exploitation. Some guards force inmates into giving them pleasure in exchange for cash, using threats and punishment to control them. Others simply abuse their power, knowing no one will ever report them. While fights and beatings are common, the most terrifying moments come from punishment cells and prison riots. Women who break the rules, or simply get on the wrong side of a guard, are thrown into solitary confinement. These dark, airless cells are pure torture. Prisoners are left alone, sometimes naked, in filthy, sweltering heat with no food and no light. Some go in for days and return damaged physiologically. Others lose their lives inside from dehydration or infection. Despite the oppression, some prisoners fight back. There have been brutal riots in the past, where desperate women attacked guards or each other. These riots are usually crushed with horrifying force. Guards storm in with batons, shields, and sometimes even live ammunition. Anyone involved in resistance faces an even worse fate: beatings, extended sentences, or sudden disappearances. Terror also comes from gangs within the prison. While foreign prisoners tend to keep to themselves, local Thai prisoners often form gangs for protection and control. These gangs decide who gets food, who gets protection, and who gets hurt. Those who cross the wrong people can be beaten, mutilated, or even taken out. As mentioned earlier, the prison holds hundreds of foreign women, many from Australia, the UK, Nigeria, and the Philippines. These foreigners are usually isolated from the Thai prisoners and denied visitors. Some even keep from contacting their embassies. After years of negotiation, the lucky ones get transferred back to their home countries. The unlucky ones die in Thailand, forgotten and broken. Few have ever escaped the Bangkok Hilton. The prison is heavily guarded, surrounded by walls, and located in the middle of Bangkok. The only real way out is through connections, money, or royal pardons, and those are rare. Most of the women here will never see the outside world again. They will live the rest of their lives in their cramped cells, broken by time, disease, or violence. On the other side of town is Bangkwang Central Prison, also known as the Big Tiger. It is Thailand's most feared prison, a place where inmates are consumed by suffering. Most prisoners here are drug offenders, many of them foreigners who thought they could outsmart the system. Overcrowding is just as severe here as in the women's prison. Cells hold far more inmates than they should, with men sleeping in shifts because there isn't enough room for everyone to lie down at the same time. Disease spreads quickly, medical care is almost non-existent, and violence is a daily occurrence. Prisoners are shackled in heavy iron chains for the first 3 months of their sentence, not to prevent escape, but to stop them from taking out themselves. The shackles, hammered onto their ankles with sledgehammers, cut deep into their flesh, causing infections and permanent scars. The brutal conditions take a severe psychological toll on prisoners. Many lose their minds, wandering the prison like zombies. Some have been locked away for decades with no hope of release, knowing they will die inside the walls of Bangkwang. Even those who maintain their sanity suffer. They live in constant fear of disease, of violence, of starvation. Food rations are meager, often consisting of nothing but a watery soup filled with insects and rotten vegetables. For some, the suffering ends with execution. Thailand still carries out the ultimate penalty, primarily for drug offenses. Inmates given capital punishment are transferred to a special section of Bangkwang, where they await their fate. Until recently, executions were carried out by firing squad. Prisoners were tied to wooden crosses and shot from behind. Now, executions are done by lethal injection, but the result is the same. Few prisoners make it out of Bangkwang alive. Those who do often describe their time inside as worse than giving up on life itself. They speak of the stench of rotting bodies, of the screams of tortured inmates, of the hopelessness that fills every corner of the prison. Prison authorities do everything they can to control what outsiders see. Some areas are strictly off limits, and foreign prisoners are hidden from view. Officials try to present a sanitized image, but the truth is impossible to ignore. Number 9. Tihar Jail. Located in New Delhi, India, this is one of the world's most notorious and feared prisons. Built in 1957, it was initially designed to hold only a few hundred inmates, but today, it has grown into a massive prison complex with over 17,500 prisoners, making it the largest prison in South Asia. The women's section, officially known as Jail Number 6, houses around 1,000 female inmates, but the number often exceeds this due to overcrowding. Women in Tihar Jail come from different walks of life, but many of them share a common fate of suffering, abuse, and despair. Some of them are convicted for taking the lives of their husbands in self-defense after years of domestic violence, while others are serial offenders involved in crimes such as kidnapping, human trafficking, and contract execution. Some were caught smuggling drugs, often as part of more extensive criminal networks that exploit women as couriers. Some prisoners are linked to extremist organizations and have been accused of planning or participating in terrorist activities. Political prisoners, especially activists who have spoken against the government, are also found in Tihar, often under trumped-up charges meant to silence dissent. Then, some are entirely innocent, victims of false accusations or corrupt police work, who find themselves trapped in a system that offers little hope of justice. The reality of life inside Tihar jail is nothing short of a nightmare. Overcrowding is one of the biggest problems, with small cells designed for a handful of prisoners now holding up to 30 women at a time. There are not enough beds, forcing many inmates to sleep on the cold, hard floor, using their arms as pillows. The air inside the cells is thick with the stench of sweat, filth, and sewage from overflowing toilets that barely function. Privacy does not exist. Even the most basic human needs become a daily struggle. Food is another major issue in Tihar, with meals consisting of watery dal, stale rotis, and rice often infested with insects. The food is barely enough to survive on, and prisoners who want anything better must bribe the guards, something most women cannot afford. Many suffer from malnutrition, and their bodies become weak over time. Those who fall sick are often left untreated due to the lack of proper medical care. Even pregnant women receive little attention, and cases of newborns dying due to negligence are not uncommon. Physical abuse is rampant in the women's section, with prison guards who are supposed to maintain order, often becoming the most significant sources of violence. Beatings are a daily occurrence, sometimes as punishment for minor infractions, and sometimes simply because the guards enjoy asserting their power over the inmates. Some women have been locked in tiny, dark cells for days or weeks without food or water, as punishment for speaking out or refusing to follow orders. There are also cases of exploitation for gratification, with guards preying on vulnerable inmates, especially young women and those without family support outside the prison. The women who resist are either beaten into submission or transferred to even worse conditions, where they are isolated and deprived of necessities. The social hierarchy inside the prison is another nightmare. Just like in the men's section, the women's prison has its own gangs and power structures. The stronger, more violent inmates control everything from food distribution to access to better sleeping arrangements. Weaker prisoners, especially newcomers, are often bullied, beaten, and forced to serve the stronger ones. Some gangs run rings meant for giving adult pleasure. In these rings, younger or more attractive inmates are used to bribe male officers in exchange for privileges such as better food, access to smuggled goods, or even protection from other inmates. Those who refused to cooperate were subjected to severe beatings or left to starve. Horrific cases from Tihar jail have shocked the world, exposing the brutality women face behind its walls. One such case was that of Rajni, a 28-year-old woman arrested for a petty theft charge. She was found lifeless in her cell under suspicious circumstances. The official report stated that she passed away of an illness, but other inmates claimed the guards beat her until she gave up the ghost for arguing over food. Her family was never allowed to see her body, and the case was quietly closed without any investigation. Another shocking incident was the 2017 prison riot in the women's section, triggered after a guard assaulted an inmate for his perversion. Enraged, the women fought back, attacking the guards, breaking furniture, and setting fire to parts of the prison. The riot was crushed within hours, with dozens of women severely beaten and thrown into solitary confinement as punishment. One of the most tragic stories from Tihar involved a well-known political activist who was arrested for speaking out against government policies. She was found hanging in her cell, but many believe prison authorities took her out, and her passing was staged as self-harm. The official version of events was accepted without question, and no investigation was conducted. Another heart-wrenching reality is that many women in Tihar are mothers, and over 100 children live inside the prison with them. These innocent kids grow up in a world of violence and abuse, never knowing what life outside the prison walls feels like. Some have never seen the outside world until they are old enough to be taken away from their mothers. Escaping from Tihar jail is nearly impossible. The prison is surrounded by high walls, armed guards, and security cameras, making any physical escape attempts futile. Bribery and political influence are the only ways out for some, but most women know they may never leave once they enter. The only real ways to get out are finishing a sentence, receiving a presidential pardon, or passing away inside. Self-harm rates are high, with many prisoners losing all hope within months of arriving. The unbearable conditions, abuse, and isolation break them down mentally and physically, pushing them to take their own lives. Number 8. Lo Wu Correctional Institution, Hong Kong. This is a women's prison in Hong Kong, near the border with Shenzhen. It can hold up to 1,400 inmates and has minimum and medium security wings. Many inmates are foreign women caught smuggling drugs, often lured by gangs with promises of quick money. Some come from poor backgrounds, seeking a way out, only to end up trapped in a nightmare. Others were part of gangs, their pasts filled with violence and betrayal. Regardless of their history, once inside Lo Wu, who they were doesn't matter. Days inside are long and harsh. Prisoners wake up at dawn, their bodies aching from thin mattresses and cold floors. Breakfast is a small portion of tasteless dry rice, barely enough to keep them standing. They are forced to work in prison workshops, sewing uniforms and making furniture, breaking their backs for hours. The work is endless, and failure is not an option. Those who work too slowly, complain, or resist are punished. The guards ensure compliance. Punishments are severe. Solitary confinement is the worst, a tiny windowless cell where the air feels thick and heavy, crushing the mind. After a few days, the walls seem to close in, and some prisoners break, begging to be let out, but the guards do not listen. Others go silent, and when they are released, they are never the same due to the mental strain. Some never come back at all. The guards hold all the power and do not need to hit to remain superior. They humiliate, intimidate, and make prisoners feel like they are living in a nightmare. There are reports of beatings in the middle of the night when no one can hear the prisoners' screams. There are also cases of prisoners suddenly falling ill but being left to suffer, ignored until it is too late. One well-known case involved a foreign woman arrested for smuggling drugs into Hong Kong. She was sentenced to years in Lo Wu, but struggled with severe health issues. After a heated argument with the guards, she was placed in solitary confinement, where she later died under mysterious circumstances. The official report claimed she died of natural causes, but many inmates believed she was neglected and left to suffer alone. Life is so unbearable that in 1998, a group of prisoners attempted to escape Lo Wu, believing they could slip past the guards at night. They were caught before they could get far. As punishment, they were placed in solitary confinement for months and denied visits, and guards allegedly beat some. Former inmates have spoken about some regions of Lo Wu that are even worse than the regular cells. These so-called hell cells are reserved for the most disobedient prisoners. Inmates placed in these cells are isolated, given only a thin mat to sleep on, and sometimes deprived of food for extended periods. Some prisoners have left these cells with severe mental health issues, unable to function correctly after release. Although the guards make life difficult, they are not the only thing to fear in this prison. The inmates can be just as dangerous. In December 2024, a violent attack broke out at Lo Wu Correctional Institution. In the morning, during a workshop session, a 32-year-old female inmate suddenly attacked a 43-year-old inmate. Officers rushed in to stop the fight and called for backup. But the attacker didn't stop. Instead, she turned on one of the officers. Despite several warnings, she refused to back down, forcing the guards to use OC foam to subdue her. The fight left the victim with a head injury, while the officer suffered an ear injury. The attacker also hurt her head and hand. Luckily, none needed to be taken to the hospital, as the prison's medical officer treated them on site. The police were called to investigate. Both inmates involved had been serving sentences for drug-related crimes, including theft and possession of dangerous drugs. The air inside Lo Wu is heavy with despair. It clings to the skin and seeps into the bones. The walls are thick, but they cannot hide the truth. This is not a place for change, for second chances. It is a place that crushes the soul, turning the strongest into shadows of themselves. Some will leave one day, but they will never indeed be free. Lo Wu never leaves them. It stays in the nightmares, in the silence, in the scars that never fade. Number 7. Insein Prison. Established in 1880 during British colonial rule, it is located in Yangon's Insein Township, Myanmar. Designed as a panopticon to optimize surveillance, it has garnered a notorious reputation for its harsh treatment of detainees, especially political prisoners. As Myanmar's largest detention facility, Insein Prison houses thousands of inmates, including at least 800 political prisoners, alongside individuals convicted of various criminal offenses. The prison's population has swelled over the years, leading to severe overcrowding and deteriorating living conditions. Female prisoners in Insein Prison face particularly harsh conditions. Following the military coup d'etat on February 1, 2021, reports indicate that at least 3,987 women were detained for political reasons, with 1,528 convicted on dubious charges. Many of these women are held in facilities initially designed for men, exacerbating the challenges they face. The conditions within the prison are deplorable. Female inmates often lack access to necessities, including adequate sanitation facilities. In some instances, over 500 women have been confined to areas with only 2 toilets, both lacking water and doors, compromising their privacy and dignity. Overcrowding further exacerbates these issues, leading to unsanitary conditions and the rapid spread of diseases. Physical abuse is a grim reality for many incarcerated women. There have been reports of inmates being subjected to beatings and other forms of physical mistreatment by prison authorities. Such abuses often go unreported due to fear of retaliation, and victims are frequently denied medical treatment, further endangering their health. However, there have been reports of how prisoners were forced to crawl on their hands and knees over sharp gravel while being chased by dogs, leaving them bloodied and bruised. The guards used these punishments to break the spirits of inmates, ensuring total obedience and fear. In 1999, a group of prisoners protested their unbearable conditions by going on a hunger strike. Their demands were simple. They wanted proper medical care and the right to read newspapers. However, instead of addressing their concerns, the authorities responded with cruelty. The prisoners were subjected to more suffering, including the infamous gravel path torture, where they were made to crawl over jagged stones while being beaten. One of the darkest events in the prison's history occurred on May 3, 2008. Prison guards gunned down more than 100 inmates during a protest, and at least 36 of them passed away instantly. But the violence did not stop there. 4 more prisoners, suspected of leading the protest, were taken away, tortured, and taken out in cold blood. The massacre sent shockwaves through the prison, reminding every inmate that any resistance would be met with brute force. Years later, another hunger strike broke out on May 24, 2011. This time, it started with 7 female prisoners protesting the government's amnesty program, which excluded most political detainees. The following day, 22 more prisoners, including Buddhist monks, joined them, demanding better conditions and the right to see their families. The authorities responded swiftly and harshly. The ringleaders were thrown into a tiny, isolated cell known as the dog cell, a place notorious for extreme torture and the complete denial of family visits. Among those locked away was Nai Ni Htun, a journalist who had once worked as an editor for the Kantaryawadi Times. In October 2022, the prison was shaken by a fatal explosion. At exactly 9:40 in the morning, 2 parcel bombs exploded inside the facility, taking the lives of at least 8 people, including prison guards. 18 visitors were also injured in the blast. Witnesses described the chaotic scene, with smoke filling the air and bodies lying motionless on the ground. The actual cause of the explosion remains unknown, but it served as yet another grim reminder of the ongoing horrors inside the prison walls. Abuse and harassment for pleasure are also pressing concerns. Female detainees have reported invasive body cavity searches upon returning from court hearings, during which they were subjected to groping by prison authorities. These degrading practices show the systemic issues within the prison system and the broader societal challenges faced by women in Myanmar. The international community has repeatedly condemned the human rights violations occurring within Insein Prison. Organizations such as Human Rights Watch have documented the systemic abuses faced by detainees, particularly women, and have called for comprehensive prison reforms. Despite these calls, meaningful change remains elusive, and the plight of female prisoners continues. Number 6. Boeung Women's Prison. Located in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, Boeung Women's Prison, famously known as Correctional Center 2, has long been a focal point of discussions concerning the harsh realities faced by its female inmates. Established in the early 1990s, this facility was intended to detain women convicted of various offenses, ranging from minor infractions to serious crimes. Over the years, the prison has represented the issues plaguing Cambodia's correctional system. Since its inception, Boeung Women's Prison has grappled with challenges related to capacity and resources. Originally designed to accommodate a limited number of inmates, the facility has been compelled to house a population far exceeding its intended capacity. This issue is not isolated to Boeung alone. Cambodia's prison system as a whole has been under scrutiny for severe overcrowding. As of 2025, data indicates that 18 out of 19 prisons monitored by the Cambodian League for the Promotion and Defense of Human Rights exceeded their official capacity, with 11 prisons operating at over 200% occupancy. A significant portion of the women imprisoned here are pre-trial detainees. According to reports released in December 2024, approximately 75% of individuals detained in prisons monitored by Laikadho were in pre-trial detention, having yet to be convicted or awaiting final judgment. Aside from overcrowding, nutrition and sanitation are additional areas of concern. Prisoners have reported receiving meals that are often inadequate in quantity and quality, with instances of moldy rice, vegetables, and unclean water being common. Female prisoners have complained that there is not enough air in the room and that the hygiene is not good. While sleeping, they need to wear socks. Otherwise, they may become sick. The poor prison conditions and the harsh realities of prison life have significantly impacted the mental health and well-being of inmates. There have been reports of many prisoners grapple with feelings of isolation, anxiety, and hopelessness. The lack of adequate mental health support services within the prison system makes these issues worse, leading to a cycle of deteriorating mental health that is often left unaddressed. The deteriorating mental health has dramatically increased the interpersonal conflicts between the female inmates. These conflicts are usually so violent that multiple lives are lost whenever there is a fight. The conditions of the prison got international recognition when activist and Boeung Lake land rights campaigner Yorm Bofa spoke about the violent arrest of 13 members of the BKL community without reason in May 2012. Yorm Bofa led the fight for their release, attending every protest, speaking to the media, and openly criticizing the government. Her efforts made her a target. She faced threats, harassment, and intimidation from authorities. During protests, police specifically focused on her. After one demonstration, NGO workers had to escort her home when officers were heard ordering her arrest, referring to her as the one with the blue krama on her head. She was later arrested and detained in Correctional Center 2. Unlike the 13 BKL members, her charges are not directly tied to protests. Instead, she is accused of involvement in the beating of a suspected thief under Article 218 of the Penal Code. Yorm Bofa was made to share a small, overcrowded cell with 62 other women. She also revealed that prisoners had to pay for basic needs like clean water and a place to sleep. The cells were hot, with little fresh air or natural light. Pre-trial detainees like Yorm Bofa were kept in the same cells as convicted criminals. Number 5. Heilongjiang Prison. Tucked away in China's freezing northeast, this prison is more than just a detention center. It's a place where women endure relentless suffering under a system designed to break them. Known as the Cemetery of Falun Gong Ladies, this notorious prison is infamous for its brutal treatment of inmates, particularly those who practice Falun Gong, a spiritual movement banned by the Chinese government. Behind its cold, towering walls, cruelty takes many forms. Prisoners are forced into exhausting labor, spending long hours in poorly ventilated workshops producing goods for export. Sleep deprivation is a common punishment, leaving inmates in a constant state of exhaustion. Beatings, electric shocks, and other physical abuse are routine, while psychological torture, forced confessions, constant surveillance, and relentless propaganda wears them down even further. One of the latest victims to come forward is Liu Jinping, a 43-year-old Falun Gong practitioner from Jiamusi City, Heilongjiang. Arrested at her home on May 14, 2021, Liu was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison and fined 15,000 yuan after a trial in December 2021. She appealed the verdict, but in April 2022, the Jiamusi Intermediate Court upheld the sentence. By the end of that year, Liu had been transferred to Heilongjiang Provincial Women's Prison. Upon arrival, she was placed in Group 5 on the 5th floor of the intensive training area. Because she refused to sign documents denouncing Falun Gong, prison guards ordered 8 inmates to beat her and force her to sit on a hard bench all night without sleep. She later reported that Falun Gong practitioners in the prison are watched at all times, even in the restroom. They are only allowed to urinate during the day and can only relieve themselves between 10 in the evening and 4 in the morning, leading many to soil themselves. The authorities also forbid them from interacting, isolating them from any form of support. After enduring relentless torture in Group 5, Liu was moved to Group 6, where the abuse continued. She was again forced to sit motionless on a small bench for hours. Any attempt to shift position resulted in severe beatings. When she went on a hunger strike to protest the inhumane treatment, the punishment only intensified. Her prolonged confinement to the stool caused severe wounds on her buttocks, which bled and stuck to her underwear. When she struggled to remove them, another inmate threatened to yank them off, worsening her pain. This kind of torment was not unique to Liu. Another practitioner reportedly had flesh ripped from her body when guards forcibly pulled down her clothing. Eventually, Liu was returned to Group 5, where guards continued to deprive her of sleep. She has grown dangerously weak. Despite international pressure, the Chinese Communist Party has refused to acknowledge the abuses at Heilongjiang Women's Prison. However, continued global condemnation may one day force them to reconsider. Another survivor, Wang Chunyan, was placed in prolonged isolation with no human contact. Propaganda videos played on a loop in an attempt to reprogram her beliefs. Like many others, she was deliberately kept away from fellow practitioners to prevent any sense of solidarity or resistance. Number 4. Tadmor Prison. Buried deep in the scorched Syrian desert near Palmyra, this prison's name is synonymous with terror. Few places in history have embodied cruelty as entirely as this fortress of suffering, where inmates, especially women, were stripped of dignity, identity, and often their lives. Built by the French as a military outpost, Tadmor was later turned into a prison, but it was under the rule of Hafez al-Assad in the 1980s that it became one of the world's most feared detention centers. Here, the government's real or imagined enemies were sent to disappear, swallowed by a system designed to break bodies and minds alike. The prison's foundation seemed to echo its unspoken law: obedience or obliteration. The guards were not merely enforcers, but executioners, torturers, and tormentors. Their infamous mantra, "We are God, your life and death are under our control," was not an empty threat. It was a chilling reality. For the women imprisoned within Tadmor's walls, the nightmare was even worse. Locked away in filthy, overcrowded cells, they endured relentless physical and psychological abuse. Torture was a daily routine, ranging from brutal beatings and electric shocks to more perverse acts of humiliation. Some were locked in solitary confinement for months, left in absolute darkness, with only the sounds of distant screams for company. One of the darkest days in Tadmor's long history came on June 27, 1980. In retaliation for a failed assassination attempt on Assad, soldiers stormed the prison and executed hundreds, perhaps even 1,000 inmates in cold blood. The massacre was not just about revenge. It was a message to anyone who dared challenge the regime. Life inside Tadmor was a slow, lethal poison. Prisoners were starved, denied medical care, and kept in conditions so vile that disease was as vile as the guards. There were no books, no letters from family, no sign of the outside world. Even the courtyard, meant to provide fresh air, became an execution ground where bodies piled up in silent warning. Despite the Syrian government's attempts to erase its dark past, survivors of Tadmor Prison have begun to share their stories, revealing the unimaginable horrors they endured. The notorious prison was officially shut down in 2001, with the remaining detainees transferred to other facilities across Syria. However, as anti-government protests swept the country in June 2011, the prison was reopened. Around 350 demonstrators were arrested and sent to Tadmor, where they faced brutal interrogations and harsh conditions. In May 2015, the prison fell into the hands of ISIS after they captured the city of Tadmor. The militants freed the prisoners and filmed the decaying interior of the facility, offering the world a rare glimpse inside its infamous walls. Soon after, on May 30th, ISIS demolished the entire complex with explosives, reducing one of Syria's most feared prisons to rubble. Though Tadmor is gone, the suffering that took place within its walls remains a lasting scar in Syria's history. Survivors continue to speak out, ensuring that the stories of those who never made it out are never forgotten. Number 3. Hoa Prison. Located in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, Hoa Prison is a place of fear, suffering, and relentless control. Built by the French colonial government, this fortress of misery has housed countless prisoners, including women, who endured unspeakable hardships within its walls. Its design is as terrifying as its reputation. The prison is shaped like an octagon, inspired by the I Ching's 8 trigrams, meant to keep inmates under constant watch. The structure is nearly impossible to escape, with 238 cells arranged in a maze of locked doors and narrow corridors. Each section is marked with letters, but for those trapped inside, names don't matter, only survival does. At its peak during the South Vietnam era, Chi Hoa held between 6,000 and 10,000 prisoners. The inmates were divided into 2 groups, political prisoners and common criminals. Men and women were kept apart, but separation offered no relief. Movement was restricted, with prisoners only allowed out of their cells for necessities like food and hygiene. Every step was watched, every moment controlled. Life inside was brutal. No matter who ruled, the suffering never stopped. Under French control, prisoners were chained in dark, airless cells, starved and beaten. When South Vietnam took over, the situation only grew worse. Overcrowding became unbearable, diseases spread like wildfire, and food was scarce. Women endured even harsher conditions, overstuffed cells with barely any space to move, poor hygiene, and relentless abuse. Medical care was almost non-existent, and pregnant inmates suffered the most, forced to endure labor in filth and neglect. Executions were common. Chi Hoa's walls have witnessed the last breaths of many. Among them were Ngo Dinh Khan, an influential political figure, and Nguyen Van Troy, a member of the National Liberation Front. The prison was more than a place of confinement. It was the end of the road for many who entered. Despite its fortress-like design, 2 men defied the odds and escaped. The first breakout was in 1945, during the Viet Minh's rebellion against the Japanese. The second, in 1995, was nothing short of legendary. Phuc 8-Finger Ngan, a notorious robber, managed to break free in a daring escape that stunned Vietnamese police. They called it an unbelievable prison break, proof that even the most secure prison in Vietnam could not hold everyone forever. For women, Hoa was more than a prison. It was a nightmare. Locked in overcrowded, unsanitary cells, they faced physical and mental torment. Guards showed no mercy, beating and torturing inmates to break their spirits. Many were denied basic medical care, and for those who were pregnant, the suffering was unimaginable. The cries of newborns echoed through the prison, reminders of a life born into captivity. Over the years, Hoa has drawn the attention of human rights organizations, exposing the cruelty behind its walls. Reports of torture, police brutality, and unexplained passings in custody have sparked outrage. Inmates were beaten until they confessed to crimes, whether they committed them or not. Some never made it out alive. In recent times, international organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have condemned Vietnam's prison system, urging reforms. Overcrowding, inhumane treatment, and the abuse of political prisoners remain serious concerns. Yet, despite the outcry, Hoa remains a symbol of suffering, a place where hope fades and fear reigns. Number 2. Bikutan Jail. Built in the 1970s, it was initially designed to hold a small number of high-risk criminals, but today it is one of the most feared detention centers in the country. The facility is packed with all kinds of criminals, drug offenders, political detainees, those who have taken the lives of others, thieves, and women accused of minor crimes. Many inmates are still awaiting trial, some for years, trapped in a system that moves too slowly. The women's section of Bikutan Jail is just as overcrowded as the men's. Cells meant for a handful of prisoners now hold dozens. With barely any space to move, women are forced to sleep sitting up or lying on cold concrete floors. The air is thick with sweat and despair, and the stench of unwashed bodies lingers. There is little access to clean water, forcing inmates to drink from rusted pipes or dirty containers. Food is scarce and often rotten. Rice mixed with bits of dried fish or soup so thin it barely counts as a meal. Malnutrition is common, leaving prisoners weak and vulnerable to disease. Medical care is almost non-existent. Sick inmates are rarely given proper treatment, and many suffer from infections, tuberculosis, and skin diseases. Pregnant women face the worst conditions, with little to no prenatal care. Some give birth inside their cells, surrounded by filth and without medical assistance. The nightmare doesn't end for them, it only passes on to their newborns. Violence is a daily reality, with weaker prisoners often falling victim to the strong. Female inmates face the constant threat of physical abuse. Guards demand bribes for necessities like food, medicine, or even the chance to see a doctor. Those who cannot pay are left to suffer. Women prisoners are especially vulnerable to abuse. Some are forced into degrading tasks to survive, while others are beaten or locked away in dark, airless punishment cells for disobedience. The psychological torment is just as cruel. Verbal abuse, isolation, and hopelessness break the spirit of even the most brutal inmates. Over the years, there have been many unexplained passings inside Bikutan Jail. Some prisoners simply vanish, never to be seen again. Others pass away from untreated illnesses, while some are found hanging in their cells under suspicious circumstances. Families are often left without answers, their loved ones gone without explanation. There have also been reports of torture. Some inmates claim they were beaten with sticks, burned with cigarettes, or suffocated with plastic bags until they confessed to crimes. The fear of punishment keeps many silent, trapped in a system where speaking out could mean paying the ultimate price. In December 2024, Cardinal Pablo Virgilio David visited Bikutan Jail to celebrate Mass and engage with the inmates, bringing attention to the plight of prisoners and advocating for their humane treatment. Human rights groups have repeatedly called for reforms, but change comes slowly. Overcrowding, corruption, and brutality continue to plague Bikutan Jail. Organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have condemned the conditions, calling them inhumane and a violation of fundamental rights. Despite this, the suffering inside Bikutan Jail remains hidden behind high walls and locked gates. Number 1. Qarchak Prison. Qarchak Prison, also known as Ray Women's Prison or Variman Prison, is one of the worst prisons in Iran, infamous for its brutal conditions. Located in Qarchak, a county in Tehran province, the prison was initially designed for far fewer inmates, but now holds over 1,400 women, twice its intended capacity. The prison is a nightmare for those inside. Overcrowding, disease, and violence are common, with political prisoners locked up alongside dangerous criminals. Reports describe horrific mistreatment, including torture and physical abuse. On May 33, 2020, Sohaila Hijab, a 30-year-old law graduate, was arrested by IRGC agents after a court hearing and thrown into Qarchak. She had been sentenced to 18 years simply for trying to form a women's rights group. COVID-19 spread through the prison in June 2020, infecting political prisoners who were already suffering from poor medical care. That same year, Australian academic Kylie Moore-Gilbert and renowned human rights lawyer Nasrin Sotoudeh were both transferred here from Evin Prison, an indication of just how ruthless the Iranian regime wanted to be. Qarchak's reputation for human rights abuses led to its blacklisting under Section 106 of the U.S. Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. The U.S. government specifically sanctioned the prison for acts of torture and extrajudicial killings. On December 7, 2021, the U.S. Treasury Department also sanctioned Sogra Kodadati, the prison's director, for her direct involvement in a violent attack. On December 13, 2020, at least 20 guards stormed the cells of female prisoners of conscience, beating them with batons and stun guns in retaliation for speaking out. Kodadati herself was accused of ordering and participating in the assault. Thanks for watching. See you in our next video.